So today we're going to be talking about SOEs in the Chinese economy. Who knows what an SOE is? Great.
State-owned enterprise.
Okay. Okay, so state-owned enterprises. So they happen in every country, or it's not unique to China necessarily. However, it is the idea, the philosophical approach to the state-owned enterprise is a sort of an extension of the Chinese socialist capitalist hybrid model that their economy has been running off of for the past couple decades. So they're much more prevalent in China than you're going to see in most other places on Earth. And it's very integrated with the political structure, right? So we hear stories of people high in the Communist Party who have family members, maybe kids or siblings, who they appoint to be heads of various SOEs in different sectors of the economy. And it's very difficult to quantify exactly how much of the national output is accounted for by state-owned enterprises, only because it's such an opaque sector, really, because there's not a lot of transparency, there's not a lot of reporting going on, because the government tries very hard to keep that sort of out of the public eye. So it's very hard to say, but various estimates put SOEs in charge of between 30 and 50% of the overall economy of China. And it's basically, they are run by the party to accomplish goals, in domestic policy, in foreign policy, and all sorts of things. Is basically the purpose of the state-owned enterprise. So here comes the interactive part. 我要问你们一个问题，你谁知道为什么中国有很多国有企业？国有企业 is state-owned enterprises. So 谁可以告诉我？为什么中国有国有企业？
因为中国的政府觉得他们是 communist。
别的人？
我不知道。
别的人？
如果你在国有企业上班。他们给你很多钱。
对，很多国有企业是我的，很多中国政府还是我的，所以他们一样做很好。Okay, so as I was talking about earlier, how basically the SOE is an outgrowth of the Chinese approach to market systems. Basically, in critical sectors of the economy, things like aviation, defense, energy, transportation and construction, things that the Chinese government deems are critical to national security and state sovereignty, they take a more active approach when it comes to those sectors of the economy. So, right, they're going to have more, a greater percentage of the economy, or of these particular sectors are owned by the state. So the Chinese government owns a disproportionately high sector of the energy sector, in particular, as opposed to something more like, whereas things more like manufacturing and things like that are not nearly to the same level owned by the state. And the Chinese government really uses these enterprises, these firms, in lieu of strong monetary or fiscal policy. In the United States, we rely very strongly, when we're implementing government actions in the economy, we rely on both fiscal and monetary policy to accomplish our government's goals, but China takes a much more active stance in determining the direction of its economy, and it uses state-owned enterprises to do this instead of some of the more traditional. I'm just realizing that I misspelled policy, but ignore that. And furthermore, state-owned enterprises are a conduit of foreign policy in China. So basically, the government can lean on these firms and basically say, oh, well, we want to expand into Africa, because we want to expand our soft power in Africa. So you should, open up a new mining facility in Africa because we want you to. So because they're not entirely market-driven systems, this leads to some problems, as you could imagine, lack of competition, lack of efficiency, because some of the goals again, such as foreign policy, are not specifically market-driven on these instances. So if we can look at how SOEs in general are performing in China, they're filling a declining share of the economy as opposed to what they were. You can barely see this graph. It's kind of fuzzy and small, but you can see this is, I believe, 1990 to about 2010. So you can see that here, this is the declining share of SOEs in the overall economy of China. And this is the number of firms, but then also in terms of like overall returns, like how much money these firms are making. It's less than this right here. So this black line is the amount of money basically that SOEs are making, as opposed to the blue line, which is what private firms are making. And in general, SOEs benefit from monopolization, right? So in sectors of the economy where they have more complete control over their competitors, they tend to perform much better in popular culture. So as you might know, may or may not know, Xi Jinping is really popular in China, even more popular than Mao, some people think, because he's embarking on this crusade against corruption and graft in SOEs, among other things. And so he's taking this very, very populist approach, going from the top down, trying to reform this sector of the economy that many people think is broken. There's been many instances of executives billing their companies thousands and thousands of dollars in expenses every day. And in a lot of these instances, Xi Jinping and his sort of coalitions have taken them out of power. But as of yet, there hasn't been any sort of like broad structural reforms, changing these firms, the structure from the ground up. And so this chart just kind of shows you right here how from about here on. So in the 1990s, the SOE was declining in its performance as a share of the overall economy. So China began a broad liberalization, which decreased the number of SOEs, which led to this kind of period of growth right here. The 2000s to the 2010s, this was a very high, strong period of growth for China. It was partly caused by the consolidation of SOEs in the 1990s. But we can see here that there's declining growth. Again, this is growth on GDP. Declining share in the economy right now, and this is largely due to the SOEs because, as I was talking about, there's reduced foreign and domestic competition. The government can basically take control of whatever industries it wants, and these state-owned firms are less efficient than any sort of competitors. However, if we look to non-strategic industries, things like manufacturing, for example, there's actually a robust private sector in China, and including international competition. So it's not like the entire Chinese economy is dead. No, far from it. There's a lot of growth going on in some of these other sectors. However, Chinese growth on GDP is projected to decrease in the coming years. So conclusions. There's two fundamental goals in the Chinese economy. One is the need for strong growth year over year, and the other need projected by the Chinese government is state ownership and control over the general direction of the economy. And so it may come to pass in the coming years and decades that these two goals are contradictory and incompatible with each other. We don't really know at this time, and this might lead to a forced reevaluation of priorities among the central and the local governments in China. So, thank you.